So last week we ended with a let's put the Gemarah on the screen first of all. Let me see where we're going. Okay, can we see the screen, everyone? Yeah. Lost you all now.
Yes, it's up.
Yes, it's up.
Johnny.
Okay. I've lost you all. Where have you gone? No, there you all are. Right. Okay. So last week we ended with this rather peculiar scenario that we started off with 3 judges for the sanctification of the new month, and unless we got a unanimous decision, we then added another 2, so we got 5. And unless we got an unanimous decision, then we added another until we got 7. And I asked a question, and I asked if anybody could tell me where these 3, 5, and 7 came from, because every place I looked it up sent me back to this Gemarah, and this seems to be the only source for it. The Gemarah that we're going to learn today here does give us some scriptural suggestions, but I think you will see, I don't know, maybe you won't agree with me, but I think you will see that they are rather tenuous, to say the least. And I think that these rabbis were making the best of a bad job, really. I think they were also, like I am, struggling to find any kind of proper support for this rather peculiar setup here of going from 3 to 5 to 7 judges. And you'll see the proofs that they bring, or the correspondences that they bring. And I don't know, see what you think. I don't think they're very satisfactory. Let's go into the Gemarah.
In the footnote, Johnny, it says that Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel was that was his opinion, 3, 5, and 7, and they said the Gemarah follows his opinion.
Yeah, if you have a look at just at the top of the screen there, can you see that? Yeah. Rabbi Shimon Gamliel. This is what we said last week. Sorry. Yeah. You're absolutely right. Yeah. This is Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel's opinion, and I think it's for that reason that the other rabbis that are mentioned here go out of their way to try and find supports for it, because Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel is Premier League. You know, he's the top guy. You can't get much higher than Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel. So if he says it, then it's right, and that's why they're searching around for some support. Had it been somebody else, they might not have, accepted it. But because it's Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel's opinion, and in fact, according to Rav Steinsaltz, this was in fact the way it was done. That was the halacha. That's the way it was actually done. So let's have a look and see what you think about these ideas. So the Gemarah asks a question. We're over here. Hani shlosha chamisha v'shiva. This idea of 3, 5, and 7 judges, keneged me. Who is it according to? Who does it correspond to? Now, there's a very strange piece of Gemarah here now, which I'd like somebody to try and explain to me, because I don't understand it. It goes like this: Pligi ba Rabbi Yitzchak bar Nachmani v'chad de'imei. There was a discussion between Rabbi Yitzchak bar Nachmani and another person, Umanu, and who was that other person? Rabbi Shimon ben Pazi. Va'amrile, and there are other people that say Rabbi Shimon ben Pazi v'chad de'imei. The discussion was between Rabbi Shimon ben Pazi and another person, Umanu, and who was that other person? Rabbi Yitzchak bar Nachmani. Now, could somebody please explain to me the difference between those two things? Because I'm completely confused. Leon, come on, help me out.
Well, the way I read it is that they're trying to say who is the more senior of the two men, Rabbi Shimon ben Pazi or Rabbi Yitzchak bar Nachmani. The important person would say, if there are two people, one's the queen and the other one is me, the queen was with some other fella. Other people would say, Leon was with some other woman the other day. It's like saying, who is the senior person, the most respected person? That's the way I read it.
All right.
I have another alternative, which is that that one of them puts forward a proposition and the other disagrees. Oh, sorry, I'll have to stop. One of them puts forward a proposition and the other disagrees, and that it's that way round. Or alternatively, the other one puts forward a proposition and the second one disagrees. So it's the one that puts forward the proposition that is the first person, and the one who disagrees is the second. Excuse the background noise.
That's good. I'll buy that as well. That makes sense. Some say that this was a matter of dispute, and then we're not told which says which, though. I suppose the first one must have been the first one. Okay, yeah, that makes sense, Julia. I'll buy that. Any other suggestions as to this very odd wording? I don't recall seeing such a peculiar expression in the Gemarah before, where not that I've learned the whole of Shas, but I've learned a fair bit. I don't recall such an odd expression where it seems that it's two people given in two different ways. But okay.
Well, nobody knows where it came from, so they're just fishing for it, trying to make an excuse.
Well, I think that's right. But the question at this point is, why does one person say Rabbi Yitzchak bar Nachmani was having a disagreement with somebody, and who was it? Oh, it was Rabbi Shimon ben Pazi. And somebody else says, no, Rabbi Shimon ben Pazi was having a disagreement. Well, who was it with? Rabbi Yitzchak bar Nachmani. Well, they're the same people. So either way, they were having a dispute between one another. But I think that both Leon and Julia's answers, which actually sit nicely with one another, gives me some satisfaction. Okay, I'm happy to move on with that because it was a little bit troubling me. Okay, let's see what they said. Chad Amar, one of them, you see, Chad is the same as Echad, okay? Chad, one of them said, Keneged Birkat Kohanim. It has to do, it corresponds with Birkat Kohanim. What is Birkat Kohanim?
Priestly benedictions.
They used to say it on Rosh Chodesh, did they? So they used to duchen on Rosh Chodesh, Johnny. Maybe.
They used to duchen every day.
I know, but
the blessings of the priest,
especially on Rosh Chodesh, maybe.
Okay, so you're right that Birkat Kohanim is the priestly blessing. What has that got to do with the price of cheese over here, Jeffrey?
Well, usually there's a senior Cohen. And it's usually in latter days the senior by age, but if there was a Cohen who was a Rov, I would think he would take precedent over the other Kohanim. I may be wrong, but
so how does that fit? What's this got to do with our 3, 5, and 7 judges, which is what they're saying?
Well, if those judges were just regular Yisraelim, neither a Cohen nor a Levi, they wouldn't have any other distinction other than their profession or their learning. Now, I don't think there was a concept of a Lord Chief Justice in those days. There may well have been, and they may well have used seniority of age as being more wisdom or more learning, but it's not necessarily the case, because we know of some Rabbonim who were brilliant in their early 20s and they outclassed everybody. So,
like Ravi Do.
Correct.
Yeah, okay. So anybody else got any suggestions as to what this Birkat Kohanim has got to do with our Gemarah here?
Have you looked at what it says, Numbers 6, 24, 26? I haven't got that.
All right.
I don't know what that is.
That actually is the Birkat Kohanim. That might help you. Let me get that up for you then. Hang on. Leon, if you would just go to it for the time being. Numbers 6. Amidbar. Chapter 6. Okay, now then, I will put it on the screen for you, and then you will, perhaps that was a good idea, that, Johnny, because that might well help you get the answer to this. There we go. Let's go from verse 22, Leon.
Hashem spoke to Moses, saying, "Speak to Aaron and his sons, saying, so shall you bless the children of Israel, saying to them, may Hashem bless you and safeguard you. May Hashem illuminate his countenance for you and be gracious to you. May Hashem lift his countenance to you and establish peace for you."
Okay, carry on. Last verse. Do the last verse.
Let them place my name upon the children of Israel, and I shall bless them.
Okay, right. Now, I will read for you the Hebrew. Not that you need me to read it for you, but I'm going to do it anyway. Yivarechecha Hashem v'yishmerecha. Ya'er Hashem panav elecha v'chuneka. I should get Mervyn to do this, shouldn't we, really?
Yeah.
Come on, Mervyn, give us a bracha.
Yivarechecha v'yishmerecha. Ya'er Adonai
Panav elecha v'chuneka.
V'sa Adonai
Panav elecha v'yasem
lecha shalom.
Amen. Okay, there we have the priestly blessing. Right, now let's go back to the Gemarah and let's ask the question again. What's that got to do with our Gemarah of having 3 judges, followed by 5 judges, followed by 7 judges?
Because there were 3 words in the first, 5 words in the second, and 7 in the third.
Yeah.
Yes. Yivarechecha Hashem v'yishmerecha. That's 3. Yair Hashem panav elecha v'chuneka. That's 5. Yisa Hashem panav elecha v'yasem lecha shalom. That's 7. Correct. 3 words followed by 5 words, followed by 7 words. So Chad Amar, one of them said, we don't know whether it was Yitzchak bar Nachmani or Shimon ben Pazi, but one of the rabbis said that this idea of 3 judges, then 5 judges and 7 judges is to do with this verse in the Torah of the priestly blessing, 3 words followed by 5 words, followed by 7 words. That's nice, isn't it?
What's that got to do with?
Good question.
Yeah.
And that's my question.
Yeah.
My question is, that's all very nice and it fits and it's cute, but what's that got to do with the Kiddush HaChodesh, with the sanctification of the month? Anyone want to try and help out and give us an example, a reason that these things should be connected?
If you look at the first verse, it says Aaron and his sons. So there have to be at least 3.
Okay. Okay. All right. What about 5 and 7, Michael?
I stop at 3.
Okay. Well,
but we're talking about
to do with the Rosh Chodesh benching. At the end, we pray for blessings, these blessings. I don't know.
Okay, so when we ask for all these blessings on a Rosh Chodesh.
Rosh Chodesh benching, yeah.
Yeah.
Mevorachim, Shabbos Mevorachim.
Well, anyone else?
No.
Okay, I will tell you what it says here in the Art Scroll, who quotes the Iyun Yaakov. And you'll see what I mean when I give you this explanation as to why I think they were all struggling really to make this fit. Because the Iyun Yaakov, and bear in mind, this is the one explanation that Art Scroll has chosen to put in, which means that it's probably the one that they think is the best, because otherwise they would put a different one in. Now, if this is the best, you'll see. Iyun Yaakov explains that a court decision and priestly blessings share one common characteristic. God ratifies both. And that's it. God ratifies both decisions. Now, Julia's not happy. I'm not happy either. Leon's shaking his head. None of us are really happy with that. It's not great, is it? And this is what I meant when I said to you last week, that wherever I looked to try and find some kind of reasoning for this, I kept getting sent back to this Gemarah because there's nowhere, I don't think. And I think that the fact that the Art Scroll has chosen this rather poor explanation of the Iyun Yaakov means that it's just a twee thing, I think. The 3 words, 5 words, and 7 words, and that's your lot. But there you are. There doesn't always have to be an answer to everything. We have to be grown up enough to say that there isn't an obvious answer, or if there is an obvious answer, I don't know it. And that's one opinion. So that was one opinion of these 2 gentlemen. Chad Amar, the other one, said, no, I've got a different support for it. Shlosha, the 3, is Keneged. It corresponds to Shomrei Hasaf, the 3 guards who guarded the doorposts. Now, what this is talking about is in the Beit HaMikdash. You'll see over here in the Steinsaltz, it sends us to Malachim Bet, chapter 25. And I'm sure Leon's already got that open. I'm going to get it on the screen for you because I've got it ready. There we go. So there's Malachim Bet, chapter 25. And let's just have a look at the context of this chapter. It's doesn't make pleasant reading, I'm afraid, but you will recognize it. Let's just go from the top, Leon. Let's read the whole chapter so that we can see what's going on.
From the first verse.
Yes.
Okay.
I'll work you hard today, Leon.
Yes. It happened in the 9th year of Zedekiah's reign, in the 10th month, on the 10th of the month, that Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylonia, he and his entire army came to wage war against Jerusalem and encamped near it and built a siege tower around it.
Stop there, Leon, please. Okay, the 10th month. What's the 10th month?
Kislev. Tevet. Shavat.
Tevet, correct. Tevet.
Tevet.
And okay, the 10th month, on the 10th of that month, what's the 10th day of the 10th month?
Asara b'Tevet.
Asara b'Tevet. And what do we do on Asara b'Tevet?
We fast.
We fast. Why do we fast?
Breach of the walls?
No. We fast because of the verse that Leon has just read. That was when the siege began. The breach of the walls, Michael, is the 17th of Tammuz.
Whoops.
Okay, so the 10th of Tevet that we all fast, or some of us fast, is all because of this verse that we've just read. The 9th year of Tzidkiyahu's reign, in the 10th month, that's Tevet, on the 10th of the month, that's Asara b'Tevet, Nebuchadnezzar came and besieged, I think is the correct word, Jerusalem. And that is why we fast on Asara b'Tevet. So when we fast on Asara b'Tevet, we have documented evidence for the reason for the fast all the way back to Tanakh. This is Tanakh, of course, this is Malachim Bet. So who wrote Malachim Bet? Well, we don't really know, but we think it was possibly Yirmiyahu, I think, but I'm not sure. Can't remember. I did know at one time, I've forgotten. But anyway, it goes back to Tanakh. So carry on, Leon. Let's see what happened.
The city came under siege until the 11th year of King Zedekiah. On the 9th day of the 4th month, the famine in the city became critical. There was no food for the people of the land. The city was breached, and all the men of war fled during the night by way of the gate between the walls, which was near the king's garden. Although the Chaldeans were upon the city all around. And the king went into flight by way of the Arava.
Okay, stop there, Leon, a sec. Hang on a minute. I just told Michael that the walls were breached on the 17th of Tammuz, which is known as Shiva Asar B'Tammuz, which is a fast day. What did we just read in the 3rd pasuk here? Read that again, verse 3.
On the 9th day of the 4th month.
Okay, stop there. The 9th day of the 4th month. What's the 4th month?
Tammuz.
What's the 9th of Tammuz is not the 17th, is it? So why do we fast on the 17th of Tammuz? Because the walls were breached. When Tanakh tells us very clearly that happened on the 9th of Tammuz. So why do we fast on the 17th of Tammuz?
It doesn't quite say that, though. It says there was a famine on the 9th and no food. Then it goes on to say the city was breached and all the men of war fled.
Oh, so you're saying to me that the breach didn't happen on the 9th of the month. I don't accept that, Leon, and I'll tell you why. It doesn't make any sense to say on the 9th of the month, the famine became severe in the city and the people of the land had no food. A running out of food doesn't happen on a specific day. It is a gradual process of, you wouldn't say that. You would say in the 4th month, they ran out of food. The fact that it's a specific day and then verse 4 goes into a specific action, I think refers to the Vatibaka Ha'ir, the city was broken into, i.e. the walls were breached. I think that refers to the 9th of the month in these psukim, and that's how the rabbis interpret it, that the breach occurred on the 9th. So my question remains, why do we recognize the 17th?
Could it be because the outer wall was breached on the 9th and the inner wall on the 17th?
Okay, that's a good answer, but I don't think it's the right one. But so that would have been a good answer had it been the case. It could have been the case. Yes, Jeffrey.
Yes. My theory is they would have breached the wall, but they waited a week before they entered. And the reason for doing that is if they were already running out of food, they would be weaker. So the people left within the walls would be a lot weaker. There'd be a lot less resistance. And they would lull them into a bit of tranquility and perhaps take them by surprise when they did actually enter the city. It would be a much easier takeover.
Okay, that would be a great answer. We'll appoint you in charge of the Babylonian troops.
Well, I'd rather decline.
I think that's a great answer. I've never seen that written anywhere, but okay, I like that answer.
No, it's a tactic. It's a tactic, isn't it? A war is a battle of tactics.
I'm going to invite David to tell us the real reason that we fast on the 17th. It's a bit disappointing, this, because Jeffrey's answer and Michael's answers are much more alluring, really. But the real answer is, David?
The 17th was when the breach was on Beit Sheni, and the other tragedies of the 17th, such as Moshe breaking the Luchot, the cessation of the Korban Tamid. The rabbis at the time thought it was not possible to get people to fast twice in a week, and therefore they instituted the 17th because of the other tragedies that happened on that day.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. Initially, this, of course, is talking about the end of the first temple, the destruction of the first temple. So, at the time, after the destruction of the first temple, they did indeed fast on the 9th of Tammuz, not the 17th. But when, and in fact, or possibly, I'm not sure about this, because they definitely did fast on Tisha B'Av when the second temple was in existence. I'm not sure whether they fasted this fast of Tammuz, but had they done so, they would have done on the 9th. The 17th was where, as David has said, I'll come to you in a sec, Jeff. The 17th was when the walls were breached at the time of the second temple, some 500 years later. Because there were other things that happened on the 17th as well, such as David said, breaking of the Luchot, the stopping of the Korban Tamid, the rabbis decided, and also because the 17th of Tammuz was the second temple, which was much fresher in their memory. For us, it doesn't make any difference whether it was 2,000 years ago or 2,500 years ago. It's just a long time. But if you were living 2,000 years ago, this is very fresh in your memory. You're going to be much more affected by the second temple's destruction. So they chose the 17th of Tammuz to fast. But the first temple, the wall was breached on the 9th of Tammuz. Yes, Jeffrey?
It's interesting that the Babylonians are referred to as the Chaldees. Now, they would be landsmen of Abraham, and Abraham was a universal figure. He was well known for centuries, and maybe there was a little bit of derech eretz for the people of Jerusalem. I'm not saying that that is the case, but they weren't all slaughtered, and they were carted back to be slaves to Babylon. So there must have been some compassion somewhere with these people.
Okay, let's read on and see what happens. Go on to verse 5, Leon, and listen carefully.
The Chaldean army pursued the king and overtook him at the plains of Jericho, and his entire army dispersed from him. They seized the king and brought him up to the king of Babylonia at Riblah, and they spoke words of judgment to him. They slaughtered Zedekiah's sons before his eyes, Nebuchadnezzar blinded Zedekiah's eyes. Then he bound him in leg irons and brought him to Babylonia. In the 5th month, on the 7th of the month, which was the 19th year of Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylonia, Nebuzaradan, the chief executioner, servant of the king of Babylonia, came to Jerusalem. He burnt the temple of Hashem, the king's palace, and all the buildings of Jerusalem, and every great house he burned in fire. And the walls of Jerusalem all around, the entire Chaldean army that was with the chief executioner smashed. The remainder of the people who were left in the city and the defectors who had surrendered to the king of Babylonia and the rest of the masses, Nebuzaradan, the chief executioner, sent into exile. But some of the poor
let's just
people...
stop there for a sec. Let's stop there for a sec. So there doesn't seem to be a lot of mercy going on there. It looked pretty horrible. Go to verse 8, and we'll just carry on our little path that we started on. In the 5th month, what's the 5th month? Av. Okay. On the 7th of the month, the executioner of Nebuchadnezzar, who was called Nebuzaradan, he arrived in Jerusalem, and he burnt the house of the Lord and the king's palace and all the houses of Jerusalem. So if you were to read those two psukim together, and I was to say to you, what day did the temple get burnt down? What would you say?
9th of Av.
No, that's because you know, not from this psukim.
Seventh.
If I just from these psukim, you would say the 7th, wouldn't you?
Yes.
Yeah.
But we know it was the 9th, don't we?
Yeah.
Do we?
No.
How do we know it was the 9th?
Because we fast for the destruction.
Okay, that's how you know it's the 9th. But how did they know to fix the 9th? Why didn't they fix the 7th?
But it would take a long time for it to burn down, to be destroyed.
That's true. So,
And they just arrived on the 7th.
All right, so they arrived on the 7th, and they had a night in the King David, right? And then on the morning of the 8th, they got up early and they said, right, let's do a bit of burning. And then it finished burning on the 9th. Is that what you're saying? And that's why we fast on the 9th.
It was destroyed on the 9th, put it like that.
Destroyed on the 9th. Okay, I'll buy that. What happened in the 2nd temple?
It was close to that date.
It
When
was
it was
close to that
destroyed.
date. It was close to that date. How close to that date was it?
It was the 10th or 11th.
Well, yes, it was. The most of the burning took place on the 10th in the 2nd temple. It was started on the 9th, and most of the burning took place on the 10th. So we've got a situation here where in the 1st temple, it looks to me like the burning started before Tisha B'Av and carried on until through Tisha B'Av, the 9th of Av. And the 2nd temple started on the 9th of Av and went through to the 10th of Av. So therefore, if we want to combine the two dates, there is one bit of overlap, isn't there? There's sort of, and that's the 9th of Av. So on the 9th was the end of the burning of the 1st temple, and the 9th was the beginning of the burning of the 2nd temple. So that is why the 9th was chosen and not the 7th or the 10th. Now, you need to know that really, because we in our history, because we actually have only the Tanakh's version of the destruction of the first temple, which is what we're reading now. We actually have non-Tanakh references to the burning of the second temple through Roman writings. And because that's more close to our time period, as it were, we concentrate more on the second temple, largely because the Mishnah and the Gemarah, the Talmud, which is what we're learning now, was born out of the destruction of the temple. We only had to write down the Mishnah and then the Gemarah because of the destruction of the temple and the exile from the land, because it was in danger of being forgotten, the oral law. So the Mishnah and the Gemarah, which we modern day Jews remain obsessed with and concentrate zillions of hours of learning across the Jewish world per year on the Talmud, and the Talmud is inextricably bound up with the destruction of the second temple. The second temple destruction has much more meaning for the Jewish people than the first temple, even though, if we're honest, the second temple was a mere shadow of the first temple. It might have been grander in design. Herod's, what's the word I'm looking for? Expansion and renovation of the temple was very grand. It was much grander than Solomon's temple. Nevertheless, the service in the first temple, the whole concept of the 10 miracles that took place in the temple, the Holy Ark was there. It wasn't there in the second temple. The first temple was a much more spiritual and successful temple. Nevertheless, we are more hung up on the second temple. You would expect that Tisha B'Av, this sounds a bit weird, that Tisha B'Av would be on the 10th, and we wouldn't have Tisha B'Av, we'd have Asara B'Av. But we don't, we have Tisha B'Av because of that overlap. The first temple was burning on the 9th, and the second temple was burning on the 9th, and we combine them and we have Tisha B'Av on the 9th, despite the fact that Malachim Bet over here describes for us the fact that they arrived on the 7th and almost certainly started the destruction on the 8th. David?
No, can I disagree with you?
Yes, with pleasure.
The passage that you've just read doesn't specify anything about when they burnt the temple. It just says when they arrived, and 2 verses later. So you've got the separation there. So it's not clear. Have a look at the parallel passage.
One second, just before you show me the parallel passage, let me disagree with that.
Okay.
Because we've got a precedent in the same chapter. Look at verse 1 and 2, and 3 and 4. Because there we're told that on the 9th of the month, the famine became severe and the city was broken into. Okay, so that we know that the 9th of Tammuz was the day it was broken into, but it doesn't say that. It's on the next pasuk. So if you're going to say, well, I know that the 9th day of Tammuz was the day that the walls were breached because it says so, then you're doing what I'm doing over here, and I'm saying that they arrived on the 7th. They would have done the burning either straight away or within 24 hours, in the same way as the pasuk on verse 3 says the 9th, and verse 4 is where it says the walls were breached. So I'm not entirely convinced of your argument on that. Now you can show me the corresponding bit.
Okay, Yirmiyahu.
chapter 52.
Correct. Verse
There
12.
it is on the screen. I've got it for you ready. I'm ahead of you.
Yeah, verse 12.
Oh, you want verse 12? Okay, there it is. Go on. Leon, are you with us?
Me?
Yeah.
You want me to read that? Yes.
Yeah.
In the 5th month, on the 10th of the month, which was the 19th year of Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylonia, Nebuzaradan, the chief executioner, who was in the service of the king of Babylonia, came to Jerusalem. He burned the temple of Hashem, the king's palace, and all the buildings of Jerusalem, and every great house he burned in fire. And all the walls of Jerusalem all around, the entire Chaldean army that was with the chief executioner smashed. And some of the poor people, the remainder of the people who were left in the city, the defectors who had surrendered to the king of Babylonia, and the rest of the masses, Nebuzaradan, the chief executioner, sent into exile.
Okay, so there we specifically have a verse that says that on the 10th day, he stood before, where are we? Verse 12. He stood before the king of Babylon in Jerusalem on the 10th of Av. And your point is, David?
Okay, so my point is that the Gemarah in Tanis explains this, that they, according to the Gemarah, they actually set fire in the late afternoon of Tisha B'Av, but the Beis Hamikdash wasn't actually destroyed completely until the 10th. The majority of the burning took place on the 10th. One of the reasons why we say Nachem at Mincha time only on Tisha B'Av is the one bracha that we say only once during the year. Why should we say it only at Mincha time? One of the explanations given was the source of Nechama, of consolation, was the fact that God decided only to destroy the physical building rather than to destroy the human beings. And because it was a source of nechama, that's why the bracha was instituted to say at mincha time. And this is also why some of the practices of Avelut on the Tisha B'Av are lessened towards mincha time, that we put on talit and tefillin, we get up off the floor, etc.
Okay, is that Gemarah in Tanit talking about the destruction of the first temple?
Yes.
Okay, in that case, I stand corrected. I thought that was talking about the second temple. I stand corrected. It doesn't make sense to me that our Avelut gets less at the very time that the destruction of the temple begins. I would have thought it would be the other way around.
Can I ask a question, please?
Yes.
It's difficult because I can't see the whole screen at the same time, but the burning took place in the 19th year of King Nebuchadnezzar, whereas the earlier, didn't it say that the famine and the end of the siege took place like several years earlier? So that it's what it really reflects what David said, that there weren't people there to be hurt. The people were hurt earlier. That was in the 9th year. So there was a period of 10 years between when Nebuchadnezzar came, saw and conquered, and when he burnt. Is that correct?
I think, I don't know. I'm looking at this chapter in Malachim. Need to look at the end of the previous chapter. Let's go back to the end of the previous chapter. I think that this chapter, I don't know what you all think, but I think this chapter 25 here that we were quoted before And it was in the 9th year of his reign, in the 10th month, on the 10th of that month, that Nebuchadnezzar, the king of Babylonia, came. I think that 9th year is referring to the 9th year of Tzidkiyahu's reign, the king of Israel, not Nebuchadnezzar's reign. Whereas the other chapter over here is talking about in the 5th month, on the 10th month, the 19th year of Nebuchadnezzar's reign. So I don't think that I think it's apples and oranges there. The siege of Jerusalem definitely didn't last 9 years, which is what it would be if those were we were talking about the same number of years of the reigns. So I think the first quotation in chapter 25 of Melachim Bet is the 9th year of Tzidkiyahu's reign, and here it's the 19th year of Nebuchadnezzar's reign. But I think it's a little bit confusing because we saw it a bit out of context. Okay, so let's just go back to what David said.
It's actually cleared up. I found the Gemarah here in Tarnis. If you want to look, it's 29a. And the Gemarah raises your difficulty based on the Pesukim in Melachim Bet and Yirmiyahu, that one's on the 7th and one's on the 10th.
So where are we? We're in
Ta'anit Chavtet Amud Aleph.
Ta'anit, here we go.
Charav Habayit Barishona.
Where did you say it was? What page?
29a.
29a. Why is this in English?
The Gemarah egg for Beitza. Egg.
Struggling with this here. Keeps flicking to English. I don't want it in English. 29a. Okay.
Yeah.
Let's put it in English for some reason. There we go. It just keeps switching. Why does it keep doing that? Maybe I can put that. Language. There we go. Language.
It's not even proper English. It's Roman English or something.
There we go. Should do it. There we go. Right. Whereabouts is it?
Charav Habayit Barishona, about halfway down.
Here we go. Here we go. Here we go. There it is on the screen now. The Mishnah further taught that the 9th of Av, the temple was destroyed the first time. The Gemarah explains that this is as it is written in the 5th month on the 7th day of the month, which was the 19th year of Nebuchadnezzar's kingdom. That's our pasuk, yeah? And he burnt the house of the Lord. And it's also written in the 5th month on the 10th day of the month. That's the pasuk that you brought, David, in Yirmiyahu. Okay? And then it says, and there's a brighter that says it's impossible to say that the temple was burned on the 7th, as it had already been stated in Yirmiyahu that it was destroyed on the 10th. And it is also impossible to say the temple was burned on the 10th because it was destroyed on the 7th. So what was it? The 7th or the 10th? Okay, here we go. On the 7th of Av, the Gentiles entered the sanctuary, and on the 7th and the 8th, they ate there, and they desecrated it by engaging in acts of fornication. So I was wrong. They didn't stay at the King David. They stayed at the Temple Inn. Okay, so they got there on the 7th, and they stayed 2 nights before they started burning, not 1 night, according to this. And then on the 9th, adjacent to nightfall, they set fire to it, and it continuously burned the entire day, etc. Okay. Thank you for that, David.
Carry on a little bit, Johnny. It's interesting.
And then the Mishnah further taught that the temple was destroyed for the 2nd time, also on the 9th of Av. How do we know that?
No. Back a bit. Still talking about the first temple.
Okay.
Amar Rabbi Yochanan.
And this is what Rabbi Yochanan meant when he said, had I been alive in that generation, I would have established, here, that's why I remember you wanted to say this now. I remember this now. I would have established the fast only on the 10th of Av, because most of the sanctuary was burned on that day. And the sages who established the fast on the 9th, how do they respond to that comment? They maintain that it's preferable to mark the beginning of the tragedy. But that doesn't fit, does it? Because the beginning of the tragedy was on the afternoon of the 9th of Av, when we are starting to get up from our morning. We put our tefillin on, we put the lights back on, we sit on chairs. Doesn't really fit in, does it? There's a little bit of dissonance there that we perhaps need to think about. Okay, that's really interesting. We haven't done very much Gemarah, but we did a different Gemarah. That's very interesting. So
that's why we have 3, 5, and 7, is it?
So no, we've not even come to that yet. Right, we need to at least come to the 3. Let's at least come to the 3. Let me go back to our Gemarah. So what the 3, if you remember, was the Shomrei Hasaf, the 3 guards on the door. We never even got as far as that, I'm afraid. Let me show you what that actually is talking about. It's talking about, let's go to back to chapter 25 of Malachim. There we go. So we got as far as verse 11. So we need to read, Leon, now verse 12 to 18.
But some of the poor people of the land, the chief executioner left to be workers in vineyards and in fields. The copper pillars of the temple of Hashem and the laver stands and the copper sea that were in the temple of Hashem, the Chaldeans shattered and carried off their copper to Babylonia. The pots, the shovels, the musical instruments, the spoons and all the copper utensils with which the Kohanim served, they took away. The pans and the bowls, whether of gold or of silver, the chief executioner took away. Excuse me. The 2 pillars, the 1 sea, and the laver stands that Solomon had made for the temple of Hashem, there was no weight with which to measure the copper of all these items. 18 cubits, the height of the 1 pillar. There was a copper capital upon it. The height of the capital extended 3 cubits above the pillar. And there were a netting and pomegranate figures upon the capital all around, all of copper. The 2nd pillar had the same ornaments upon the netting. The chief executioner took Sariah, the chief Kohen, and Zephaniah, the deputy Kohen, and the 3 gatekeepers. From the city, he took 1 officer who was in charge of the men of war, 5 men from those advisors who see the king's face, who were found in the city, the secretary of the general of the army, who would marshal the common people for war, and 60 men of the common people who were found in the city. Nebuzaradan the chief executioner took them and brought them to the king of Babylonia at Riblah.
Okay, let's stop there. Let's stop there. The important verse here, and the reason that I asked Leon to read all of that, is to show you how insignificant the verse that our Gemarah brings appears to be. Verse 18, well, all these verses are describing the ransacking of the temple. It's interesting that the chief executioner took the gold and silver, and the rest of the army took the copper. That's the usual way, isn't it? The officers get the best deal, and the soldiers get the less best deal. But an interesting expression, just as a by the way, in verse 16, Lo haya mishkal lenegoshet kol hakelim ha'ela. There was no weight for the copper of all vessels. What does that mean, do you think?
It was
Just so heavy.
too heavy to weigh.
Yeah, it was so much that it was impossible to weigh it. That's how much copper there was there. And obviously, even back then, copper was valuable. Today, that's what people nick copper piping, don't they? Ganovim like to nick copper piping to weigh it in and get money for it. So copper was valuable. But the reason that I wanted to read all of that is just look at verse 18. Amongst all this havoc that's going on, the chief executioner takes the head priest, which is an interesting expression, Kohen HaRosh. It doesn't say Kohen HaGadol. Don't know why it says Kohen HaRosh. Perhaps need to think about that. I've only just spotted that. And Zephaniah, the vice head priest, Vet Shloshet Shomrei Asaf, and 3 keepers of the utensils. And then he goes on to say who else he took, a eunuch, and 5 men who saw the king's face. We'll come back to that. What's this got to do with anything? That our Gemarah brings this pasuk as a support for this 357 business, and it just appears to me anyway to have just picked out of nowhere something that's got 3 people in it. What significance can there be? Anybody got any ideas?
Well, the 3 and 5 coming in following one verse after the other. I don't know where the 7 is.
Right, well, that's well spotted, Michael, because the Gemarah is going to quote the next pasuk for 5. You're right about that. The 5 men who saw the king's face, whoever they were, presumably they were his closest advisors. But okay, so 3 keepers of the utensils, 5 people who saw the king's face, 7 something else, which we'll see in the Gemarah in a minute, and a partridge in a pear tree. I mean, what's it got to do with anything? To me, it looks a bit contrived. Can anybody help our Gemarah out? Okay, there is an explanation given in one of the footnotes in the art scroll, but I will come to that in a moment. So let's just...
Rob Steinsell says it. Can I read it, Johnny?
Yeah, please do.
It says, since, well, it's in the paragraph, since these numbers represent, that's the 3, 5, and 7 that you just read out, 3 and 5 anyhow. Since these numbers represent appointments of distinction, the rabbi saw fit to employ them in the composition of the court as well.
Yeah, that's pretty much what Rashi says, based on what we'll see in a sec.
Yeah.
So let's just do the 3, 5, and 7, and then we'll talk about it. So the 3 comes from here. Just remember verse 19, if you will. The eunuch and the 5 men who saw the king's face, because that's where the 5 comes from. Let's go back to the Gemarah. Chamisha meiroe pnei hamelech. The 5 comes from those who saw the face of the king, and it quotes that verse 25:19 that we've just said. Okay, and 7 corresponds to the 7 officers who saw the king's face. Now, the reason that I had the chapter that David quoted earlier on in Yirmiyahu was not because I read his mind, was because later on in that chapter, in verse 25, is the verse that we rely on for the 7. So let's go and have a look at that, because I had that ready as well. There it is. Leon, verse 25, please.
Sorry, I'm just a little bit confused. 25 of verse 25 of
Jeremiah 52. Jeremiah 52.
Yes. From the city, he took 1 officer who was in charge of the men of war, 7 men from those advisors who see the king's face, who were found in the city.
Right, just stop there, Leon. David, you very nicely pointed into the correct Gemarah that explained the discrepancy of the 7th and the 9th of Av. Can you do the same for the discrepancy in the number of Roei Pnei HaMelech? Because Malachim Bet says 5 and Yirmiyahu says 7. Okay, there's some homework for you, David, for next week.
Thank you.
Okay, I know you've got nothing else to do, so there's some homework. I didn't, to be honest, have time to have a look, but it did strike me very obviously that what Yirmiyahu is describing is exactly the same event as Malachim Bet is describing, and we have a discrepancy in the numbers. So we need to try and explain that. Rashi, on the other hand, doesn't go to Yirmiyahu. Rashi goes to a different set of 7. Rashi brings us another example of 7 advisors or people who see the king's face. Leon knows because he's read the footnote in the art scroll. Anybody, if you get this, I'll be really impressed. Anybody, any idea what Rashi might be referring to? Another place in Tanakh where we see 7 specific advisors to the king. No, you're not going to get it. It's unfair. But I will show it you. There it is. Are you ready, Leon? Have you got it on the...
Yes.
Okay, it's
on
in
the 7th...
Megillat Esther, chapter 1, verse 10.
On the 7th day, when the heart of the king was merry with wine, he told Mehuman, Bizeta, Harbona, Bigta, and Abagta, Zeta, and Caracas, the 7 chamberlains who attended King Akashwara, to bring Queen Vashti before the king adorned with the royal crown to show off to the people.
Okay, so you wouldn't remember that because the main part of the story, of course, is the bringing of Vashti. But within there, we find that Akashwara, the king, had 7 advisors who he sent to schlep Vashti off to the thing. B'yom hashvi'i ketov lev hamelech v'yayin amar limhuman bizata charvona b'ktav akta zeitar v'charkas. And we say it very quickly. But there are 7 shivat asarisim, the 7 officers, hamesharatim et pnei hamelech Achashverosh, who serve the face of the king of Akashwara. So Rashi, I think, I'm trying to get into Rashi's head here, and I think Rashi is not happy with the pasuk in Yirmiyah because he knows of the pasuk in Malachim Bet, which is contradictory to the verse in Jeremiah. And so he goes somewhere else for his 7, and it's the 7 advisors of Akashwara. Now, again, I'll ask the question and we'll finish with this. What's all this got to do with the Kiddush HaChodesh? And the answer really is that what somebody said before is not much. That's true, Julia, not much. But these were all descriptions of courts, of kingly courts. The 3 Shomrei Hasaf, the 5 Roei Pnei HaMelech, and the 7 Misharatim Pnei HaMelech. These 3, 5, and 7 were all courtiers of the king. Now, what is a courtier? Why did I use that word? Because it tells us it was part of a court. So it's a tenuous link to the court situation of how many judges we need at the court to sanctify the new moon. It's a tenuous connection, but it's the best that the Gemarah can do. Yes, Julia?
Are there any other discrepancies in Jeremiah with the other verses that we've just been looking at, other than the number 7 for the people who's the number of faces? Are there other descriptions of the destruction that are different?
I don't know. David will tell us next week when he's done his homework. It's a very good question. Are there any other discrepancies? And if so, how are they dealt with? Good question. Don't know. Let's try and find that for next week, because we've run out of time now, and I don't want to rush the answers. So if we just finish off by looking at our Gemarah again, and just finishing off the little section. So here we are. So they have these 3 things: Shomrei Asaf, Roei Pnei HaMelech, and the 7 of Jeremiah. Rashi says it's the 7 of Esther. And then we're going to have a little repetition of that at the beginning of next week's Shiur, and then we will look at a little side tangent that we go off regarding the intercalation of the year. So it's a good place to stop there, and we'll start again next week, please God, with the discrepancies between Malachim, Bet, and Jeremiah. Okay, any questions or comments on the whistle-stop tour that we have done today through 2 destructions?
I have a little bit of a problem with the 7, because the 7 has got nothing to do with Israel. It's to do with Nebuchadnezzar. It's not. Why should they pick on something that's from a different race to justify the number 7?
You mean for Akashwara, Rashi's opinion?
Yes. Yeah, because there's nothing.
I suppose it's interesting, because what the pshat is that since these were human courts of the king, then it reflects the idea of a royal performance, if you like. But you're right, I suppose. Why should we take off? Well, if I refer you to the Shiur on Sunday, Michael, when we talked about how local pagan cultures infiltrate our own minhagim to such a great degree. Maybe this is another, and maybe this is one of the first examples of that. Maybe this idea of 7 courtiers coming from Akashwara was something which we imported from the local surrounding culture. Could be. Except, of course, that in the first temple times, that was before the time of Akashwara. Akashwara, the story of Purim took place between the 2 temples. So if we were talking about the time of the first temple of the Kiddush HaChodesh, then we can't say that was infiltrated from there, because it came afterwards. But for the second temple, very likely that was an influence from outside. I think that's right. Any other comments? Leon?
Johnny, just a grammatical matter. Reb Shimon ben Pazi. Why is there a nakuda in the name Pazi in the Zayin? Does it make a difference to how you pronounce it, or what?
I don't know. Rabbi Shimon ben Pazi.
Could it be it's a nickname?
Paz. What does Paz mean? Where have you seen Paz before?
Sweet tooth.
Petrol station.
Thank you. Petrol station. Yes. And what colour is that Paz petrol station, Vivian?
Green, I think. No.
No, that's
Yellow.
Alon.
Yes, yeah.
Yellow.
Dora Alon.
Oh,
It's yellow.
Yellow. It's yellow.
Yellow. Yeah.
And I don't. It's not really meant to be yellow. What do you think it's meant to be?
gold.
Yes, gold. Paz means gold. Paz means pure gold. Where do you see the Nakuda, Leon?
Immediately after the Zayin, before the Yud.
And where is
It's
that?
in the Art
In the Art Scroll Gemarah?
Yes.
I'm looking in the Art Scroll and I can't see it. Where
And
should
Rabbi Stein tells it as well. A full stop, you mean, Leon?
No, halfway up the Zayin.
I'm looking in the Art Scroll. I can't see it, Leon. Where do you see it? How many lines from the bottom of the Amud?
I'm looking at where it's translated by Art Scroll does the Hebrew and then the English of a few words.
Right.
They do it that way.
So you mean in the English where it says Rabbi Shimon ben Pazi and a dot?
Yes.
I think it's a full stop.
No, it's in the Hebrew.
Oh, okay. It's just a dagesh. Like we sometimes have a dot in a mem or a dot in a dalad. It's to stress.
No, but maybe yes. Yes.
It stresses the syllable or the letter.
Pazi then. Pazi.
Yeah, it would be Pazi.
Pazi.
Yeah.
Right. Okay.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that was interesting, wasn't it? Any other comments before we finish? Okay. Those of you who are coming tonight, I'll see you tonight. Those of you who aren't and want to join on Zoom, feel free to do so. The link has been sent out. I'll send it out again later on this afternoon as a reminder. See you soon.
Thank you, Johnny.
Thank you, Johnny.
Thank you.
Thank you, Johnny.
Thank you.
Bye.